Well, hello and welcome, or welcome back. This is Dr. Faske from Arkansas State University, and I'm here today to talk to you about Bordner number 24, page 14, from ASBOA Junior High All-Region Trombone Etudes Set 1. So, let's go ahead and dive in. We know our procedure here. We're always going to start with the top left and look at all the pertinent information that we need to double check to make sure. We're going to do it the same way every time that we do with every etude that we come across. So we start top left of number 24. We see that it's bass clef. That's good. It means it's the trombone book. We see that there's one flat, and in this context, that means F major. So you should probably practice your F major scale, multiple octaves if you can. And then common time, 4/4 time. That means 4 beats per measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. But unlike the previous etude that we worked on, this one has a lot more information at the beginning and throughout. More things for you to decipher. Now, some of these terms you may already know, other terms you may not know at all. And this is where Google can be your friend. If we look here at the beginning, there's a word, or 2 words actually, above the first measure, andante cantabile. Now, back in the day when I was a young student, I had a music dictionary, a little pocket dictionary that fit in my trombone case, and I could flip to A for andante and find out that it meant walking speed. And then I could go to the C and I could look up cantabile and find out that it means in a singing style or a singing manner. You put those two together, at a walking speed, moderate tempo, in a singing manner or a singing style, meaning more lyrical rather than technical. Now, if you look at the etude itself, there are some slurs, but there are not big phrase marks like there might be in a legato study book. So we have to make sure that everything that we're doing is in a lyrical style, but not necessarily legato tongued all the time. But the idea of musical line is very important. And we create musical line by giving a sense of direction to the music. So we need to make sure we know where we're breathing. It's very, very important that we breathe in the same places every time that we play the etude, which means, again, it's really important to have your pencil and to be ready to mark some things in the part. So if I look here at the beginning, we have mezzo piano dynamic. And then at the halfway through the second measure, we have CRESC with a bunch of dots to make a dotted line all the way to the downbeat of the second line. That's a crescendo. It's a different way of writing crescendo. So we're getting a little bit louder in each measure all the way up to that forte dynamic at the beginning of the second line. So we want to make sure that we make that crescendo part of our practice on this from the beginning. I was taught years ago that you learn your notes and rhythms, then you add your dynamics, and then you might add some changes and fluctuations in tempo. And you create it almost like a layered sort of approach. There's nothing wrong with that approach, but it means that the things that you learned the most recently are the least reinforced. So you want to make sure that what you're doing reinforces all of the things that should be happening as early on in the game as possible. There's nothing wrong with going through and just working on notes and rhythms first, but don't wait too long to start incorporating those other elements. So if I play here for you from the very beginning through the first to the second line, hopefully you can hear what I'm aiming for. And so that's the first line plus a note. Everything that we're doing leads to that first C. And then you'll see that on the next note immediately following, the bottom drops out of the dynamic and we go down to piano for the F on the upbeat of 2. More on that in a minute. But if we're talking about this opening section, let's talk about the breathing for just 1 second. We talked about how this in a singing manner means longer musical ideas. One of the ways that we can do that is to make sure that we're breathing in great locations. In my opinion, I believe that you should be able to breathe at the beginning and then breathe again after the half note in measure 3, so that you're making the second half of measure 3 almost like a pickup or a connection to the next phrase. Watch what happens when I do it another way. doesn't have the same sense of connectivity. I can give that line connectivity by breathing this way. I think that gives a better sense of musical line. So it's something to think about. Now, if you can't do it right away, it's okay. It's something to work towards. Maybe you have a little sneak breath in there somewhere, but it should be a smaller breath, a faster breath, to sort of help carry you over, and then still take those structural breaths in those places that I was talking about. Now, when we get to the second line, it can be really tricky to combine rhythms that, that have a bunch of upbeat figures in them, or movement that happens off of the primary beat, along with a big change or fluctuation in dynamics. So this second line can be a little bit tricky. But I think the secret here is to go as slow as you need to go to demonstrate that you can do it when you're early on in the practice session. So what I might do if I'm first looking at the second line, I might approach it this way. Go really, really slow and try your best to really play a loud downbeat dotted quarter note, a soft upbeat of 2, and a growth into the next downbeat dotted quarter note. Drop down, grow to the next downbeat dotted quarter note, and stay loud all the way through the restatement of the original theme in the last measure of the second line. So if I put all that together, if I'm working on it regularly, it should sound something like this. Now, if you notice there, in the second to last measure of the second line, there's an RIT with a dotted line. It's retardando. We need to slow down in that measure. It creates a sense of drama and suspense. It's sort of like it's hanging, and then we drop to the next downbeat, which is the return of the material from the very, very beginning. Our memory will remember that we just played that, less than 10 measures before. And the audience will hear that as well. So you want to take them on that journey with you. Musical expression is a great way to show the audience that you really know what's going on with the music. If you play it sort of flat line and everything is quote unquote perfect, very rarely have I found that those musicians that play things with the aim of perfect are able to actually demonstrate the musical expression part. You always take a more serious risk when you incorporate the musical expression, but it's worth it. It's the part that makes a player set apart from everyone else. So why not make it a part of what you do? So continuing on, if you noticed what I did with my breathing there, it was sort of similar to what we did in the first line. I did sneak a breath after the loud note before the soft phrases started, but then in the third measure, I didn't breathe after the first dotted quarter note. I played A natural, D, C sharp, then I breathed and connected everything to the following downbeat, giving that sense of musical line by playing longer than one measure on a breath. So carrying on, we have a restatement of the first theme, the a tempo of the first theme, that happens at the end of the second line. And you'll notice that there is a sign right before that, or right over that bar line. It looks like an S with a line and a couple of dots. More on that in a minute, but just make a mental note that you've seen that already. So I'm gonna play this next section for you, and listen what happens to the music as we approach the fine in the second to last line, second measure. There's one thing that we're supposed to do, and then something that we can't do, and I'll explain that in just a moment. So we have the original statement at mezzo piano. We have a crescendo till halfway through, and we have a bunch of descending scale lines. But if you notice towards the end of that line, it says poco dot 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 poco dot 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 diminuendo dot 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 all the way down to piano. What it doesn't do is slow down. It diminuendos, meaning it gets softer down to nothing, but it doesn't slow down. There's going to be a tendency to combine those things together into something like this. And that's not what's written on the page. So you want to make sure that you guard against that. Everything that you can do to keep the tempo going in spite of the diminuendo. One of the easiest ways to do that is to practice the section with a metronome, making sure that you do the diminuendos as written, but not slowing down, staying with your original metronome marking. Now, after the fine, that is technically the end. Fine meaning final or ending. It's Italian for ending. We have a double bar with a fermata. We keep going. We play everything up to the end of the page, and then you'll notice there's another sign like the one that we talked about before. And there's an instruction at the bottom of the last measure. There's RIT, so we slow down ritardando through that bar. And then we have a DS al fine. DS meaning del segno, back to the sign, which is the sign that we saw at the end of the second line. So we play the end of the etude, and when we get to the end of the etude, we go back to the last measure of the second line, and we play again all the way to the fine. So it's a big road map. It takes a second to figure it out, but once you figure it out, one of the ways that I have found that it really helps is to take a highlighter, whether it's pink or yellow or whatever, red, highlight both of the signs so you can see them easily in the music. Sometimes, once we write a bunch of stuff on our music, it can be hard to see everything that's actually there. And having a little burst of color to help you find those things quickly can help in a high-pressure situation. So if I start here after the fine, and so on and so forth. You notice that we have the retard at the very end. And then when we return to the last measure of the second line at the a tempo and the sign, it's back to the tempo from the beginning. So you really want to create a sense of drama towards the end so that when you flip back up to the other sign, you're letting the audience know that we're returning to the original tempo. So you really want to draw back as much as you can to create a large enough change in tempo that it's clear to the listener, whether they have music in their hand or not, that you're making something happen with the tempo. Let me see if I can demonstrate. So you want to create as much of a difference there as you can. Now, if we're going through here, there's a lot of accidentals. There are a lot of notes that might not be completely familiar to you. One of the easiest ways to figure this out, if you have a note that you don't quite know, remember what an accidental does to the note. A sharp raises a note by half step. The trombone slide moves in a series of half steps. So for example, let's say that you're not too sure about where the G sharp lives on trombone. I'm looking specifically at the G sharp in measure 2 on beat 4. We know where G lives, hopefully. It's 4th position, right? If a sharp raises a note by a half step, then we go up by 1 half step, 1 position. G sharp lives in 3rd. B natural is a little bit funkier because if we're in B flat in 1st position, we can't go above B flat. We talked about that a little bit last time. But we do know that B flat can also be played in 5th position. And if B flat can be played in fifth position and a natural is higher than a flat, it's one half note or half. For the B natural, it's not as straightforward as it is for the G sharp. We know that B flat is in first position, but we can't go above first. But we also know that B flat can be played in fifth position. B natural is one half step above that, one position above that. So B natural is in fourth position. So that if you're not sure about a particular note, you can look up a trombone fingering chart. But you can also use what you know about the half steps and know about what the accidentals do. A sharp raises it a half step, a flat lowers it a half step. A natural is a half step lower than a sharp, but a half step higher than a flat. You can figure these things out if you just give yourself a pencil and 10 or 15 seconds to work out the positioning of it. And it's worth it if it's a note that you don't really know to take the time to write it in. I'll say this over and over again. You're not selling out or cheapening the experience by writing in the occasional note. If you look at some of my solo parts of some of my favorite pieces, they are riddled with markings. Sometimes they change, and I erase things depending on how I'm feeling about the music at the time. But I have written all kinds of things, and most of the stuff that's in my file cabinet. And there's nothing wrong with doing that every now and then. A short pencil is always better than a long memory. So that's Etude number 24. I'm going to do what I did the last time, and I'm going to play through the whole thing for you here at the end so that you can get sort of my full take on how the Etude works.